Hey guys, this is Jam of Jam19.ph and welcome back to my channel, and today we're gonna do a gaming review of the latest smartphone from Samsung, the Galaxy A52 5G. So yes, there's the A52 and then there's the A52 5G. So let's talk about the features that are interesting dito specs wise. So first we got here the 6.5-inch Full HD Plus Super AMOLED display with a 120Hz refresh rate. The A52 comes with a 90Hz refresh rate. As for the processor, we got here a Snapdragon 750 5G octa-core chipset, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of internal storage, and of course we got here 4500 mAh of battery with 25 watts na charging. I think those are the essential things regarding gaming dito sa A52 5G. So what are we waiting for? Let's do a gaming review of this smartphone.
For our first game dito sa ating video, we're gonna go for the Galaxy A52 5G on the Lara Croft Go. So this game can run at 120 frames per second at max, I believe, or even 144. I'm not sure na kung ano yung update niya. But yeah, we will start benchmarking this one once we're in the game na mismo. So there we go. Let's start recording. So as you can see in our median frames per second, we're running the game at the 88 median frames per second. I'm not sure why it's not going more than that, but yeah, it's 88 median frames per second right now. I hope that we're not capped at 90 frames per second despite having a 120 frames per second on this smartphone. So as you can see in here, it is smooth. I'm not sure if you could see that clearly sa ating camera, but this one is quite smooth. I actually like Lara Croft Go as an example sa ating 120 frames per second na game sa mga smartphone kasi yan, nalaglag tayo. Maganda yung ano natin, takbo natin. Supposedly dito, ayan. So, we're still running the game at 84 frames per second. So, this is a preview of a smartphone na it's running at more than 60 frames per second. And yes, there was a drop. As you can see kanina dito, you can see the mouse below. There was a drop because of the menu. But once we go back, as you can see in here, it's almost steady at around 80 frames per second. So yeah, nothing much to see dito aside from the game running at more than 60 frames per second. So yes, the smartphone is capable of running at more than 60 frames per second, unlike other smartphones with a 90Hz display or 120Hz display. So the Galaxy A52 5G thankfully can run these games at more than 60 frames per second. So yeah, this is just a preview. We will not do a full benchmark dito because this is just what we can expect on the display of the smartphone if we can go up to 120 frames per second. So yeah, let's proceed to our next game. For our next game, it's another preview of what the 120Hz display of the A52 5G can do. So this is Real Racing 3. So let's see if we could run more than 60 frames per second on this game, because other smartphones who are running the game at 60 frames per on a 90Hz display cannot run this at more than 60 frames per second. So let's see if we could run this one on a higher frame rate. So yes, we will start benchmarking this one once we're inside the racetrack. There we go. So let's start benchmarking this one. Let's see here. Okay, so back to 0. There we go. So we're running the game at 77 median frames per second, surprisingly. So yes, the game is capable of running at more than 60 frames per second on the Galaxy A52 5G. Actually, we're getting 87 frames per second right now. Got Michael in here. So this one will be a very short. As you can see, that one is very short. But as you can see in here, in our graph below, we're getting more than 75 frames per second, going below 56 depending on what's actually happening on the game. But yeah, you could see in here the graph below, the frames per second, we were able to run it at more than 80 frames per second. So that's good. So yes, the smartphone is capable of running at 60 frames per second. So that's a preview of what the 120Hz display can, what we can do with the 120Hz display. This is actually pretty good, as the smartphone is smoother pagdating sa display compared to other smartphones at the mid-range market. So yes, it's nice to have that one on the Galaxy A52 5G. Now time to do a real benchmark. Let's start with League of Legends Wild Rift. For our next game, it's League of Legends Wild Rift. So as you can see in here, let's go to the graphics settings. Let's set it at custom settings. So ultra yung graphics natin. Let's see what this thing can do at maximum settings. Of course, we got on, post processing on, character inking on. So everything's on. So as the highest frame rate that we can get on this one is actually 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, there's no 90 frames per second on this one. But yeah, let's try playing this game and tignan natin kung ano yung magiging ano natin. So co-op versus AI lang para mabilis. Then tignan natin kung ano yung magiging performance ni Galaxy A52 5G. Alright, so we're in the game right now. So let's start benchmarking this one. So let's see what will be the FPS that we can get on the Galaxy A52 5G. So right now, we're running it at 59 frames to 62 frames per second. And so the median is getting at around 54. It's getting up. I mean, look at this one. We got here the FPS naman at the upper right of the smartphone. We got a good ping right now. FPS is 61, 62. So everything's pretty well right now. So I'm pretty sure that the game would run just fine dito sa League of Legends Wild Rift. So as you can see right now, medyo ma-action yung mga nangyayari dito. I mean, we got here the AI and everything. And yet, the game is running just fine at 58 median frames per second. So let's extend the frames per second graph below. So as you can see in here, the graph below shows us that the smartphone is capable of running League of Legends Wild Rift without any problems. So it's very smooth. 60 frames per second, not much of a frame drop, so that's really good. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because of the Snapdragon 750G that we got on the smartphone. I mean, that's a very capable smartphone for games. So there we go. Still at, so it's going down to 55 kanina yan. Pero it's back to 60, 58. So that's why the median frames per second is 58. So I believe 58 median frames per second is still fine for me. As long as hindi siya bumaba ng 55. I mean, there are frame drops, understandably. Ayan, mamamatay na naman tayo. But yeah, you could see in here that the smartphone is running really smooth. Unfortunately, there's no 90 frames per second on this one. I was hoping na meron 90 frames per second because of the display and 750G 5G chipset. But yeah, I'm still fine with it at 58 median frames per second. Patay tayo, thankfully. But yeah, the graph is still running pretty fine. May mga frame drops tayo nakita dito, but it's not that drastic. It doesn't affect my gameplay mostly dito sa League of Legends Wild Rift. So yeah, that's still fine with me. As long as hindi ako masyadong, naapektuhan nung mga frame drops na yun when it comes to gaming. Oh, so let's try again sa mga clashes. So nakikita nyo sa clashes, minsan may konting frame drops, but it's not that drastic. You can see in the video that hindi naman siya ganun kalala pagdating doon sa frame drops. But yeah, you can see in the frame drop, the FPS graph below, you can see my mouse. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse over here. So this one is actually showing us yung frame drop. So there's a lot of skills going on. There's a lot of things going on. So yeah, there's a frame drop on that one. But yeah, you can see in here, almost smooth naman, 58 median frames per second. And yeah, I believe this is what we can get sa League of Legends Wild Rift. So I'm gonna finish the game and tignan natin kung ano bang magiging performance natin dito sa League of Legends Wild Rift. So tapusin ko lang yung game, then discuss tayo later na ating verdict. So there we go, we've ended our game bench for this one. So League of Legends Wild Rift, we got a 58 median frames per second. As you can see at the FPS graph below, it's not that smooth. I mean, there's some frame drops you can see in here. It's noticeable, very noticeable actually, but when it comes to gameplay, I was actually pretty happy. I mean, despite having these frame drops, my gameplay wasn't affected on this one. So everything was running pretty smooth and running pretty well. So I really appreciate the performance and what we can get dito sa Snapdragon 750G, considering that we're getting here a ultra graphics at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, it's maxed at 60 frames per second. So now, time to proceed to our next game. For our next game, it's Pubg Mobile. So as you can see in here, we're running the game na, and we're gonna play in arcade mode. So there's a lot of action going on here. But first, let's check out the graphics settings. So the smartphone is capable of running Pubg Mobile at ultra frame rates, which is 40 frames per second at balanced graphics settings. You can even run it at HD graphics settings. Unfortunately, it's maxed out at high frame rate, so we're gonna go for ultra. and the balance settings. We're gonna add the colorful style and also anti-aliasing on this one. So let's see yung ating magiging performance for this one. So let's try, ayan, benchmarking this one. Let's start benchmarking this one. Pubg Mobile, there we go. Median frames per second is already at 39, 37. So after we drop, we've reached 21 frames per second. Right now it's running on 30 frames per second, 28. So the median frames per second isn't that, I believe, optimized for this game. I believe kulang siya sa optimization. So let's see. There we go. We're dropping in here, boys. Let's see what we can get. Oh no. So as you can see in here, the game is running at 13 median frames per second. So normally siya, nag-normalize. Yan, namatay tayo. Nagulat ako doon. Naramdaman niyo yung gulat ko doon. Well, it has normalized. So since we're dead, we're gonna just spectate our teammates, and let's see if there will be things that will be going on. So as you can see in here, the game is still running at 38, 30, 40. So yeah, it's gonna max out din naman at 40 frames per second eventually. Kanina parang medyo disappointing at 20, 21 frames per second. But yeah, you can see in here that it's going at 40. We're just watching our teammate. Let's see what will happen. And still rendering and everything, but yeah, we can check out that yung ating frames per second on this one. And yes, you can see in here, it's steady at 40 frames per second now, going down 39. So depending on what's going on. So there we go. Our teammate has managed to kill that one, and yet yeah, 39 medium frames per second na tayo. Alright, so this one is running pretty smooth actually after a few seconds of playing the game. So this is good. Okay, so our teammate has been killed, and this guy is still out of the play zone. So we've ended the game kasi walang nangyari and all. But what you can see in here dito sa frames natin below is that at the start, you could see in here that there was some frame drops. Ito sa simula, but it's because of mainly of the intro, the drop and everything. But once we got into the game, you can see in here that there's only a few minimal frame drops on the smartphone, and in the end we could see in here that we're running the game at 40 frames per second. I believe the smartphone is capable of running at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, hindi tayo binigyan ng ganong settings, but if you're gonna use some third-party applications, you could run Pubg Mobile at 60 frames per second. I actually appreciate that we're getting here a 120Hz display. We got a better touch sampling rate, which means that the smartphone is actually capable of having a responsive display, especially on games like this one. Now, we've seen Pubg Mobile. Time to proceed to our next game, which is the last game, which is Genshin Impact. So for our next game, it's Genshin Impact. So as you can see in here, we're at Mondstadt, and we're gonna run the game at the lowest graphic settings with 60 frames per second. So I'm pretty sure that this one isn't running at 60 frames per second right now. I am not sure if I could run it at more than 30 frames per second. I can really feel that there's a frame drop on this one. But before benchmarking this one, let's try setting it at 30 frames per second if there will be some improvements on the smartphone. So there we go, not much improvement. Let's see in here if I could exit some applications, if that can help. No, it didn't help at all. I can still feel the lag on this one. So yeah, we're gonna set it up at 60 frames per second. Try natin i-maximize kung anong kaya maximize, and then of course lower graphic settings and everything, so we could have a better frame rates on this one. There we go. So let's start benchmarking this one. So as you can see in here, we're here at Mondstadt, and yeah, we got here at the lowest graphic settings. We're running the game at 25 frames per second, so that is not good for this game. Tingnan natin once we go out, we could have better frame rates. Let's see if we could get better frame rates if we're gonna kill some of these pigeons. There we go. So para magalit si Timmy ba yun? Ooh. Oh, okay, Sala. But yeah, there we go. We got here a foul. And yeah, this is not really good considering na nasa 23 million frames per second tayo. Yes, you can play the game, but you cannot play the game at an enjoyable frame rate. So, let's try going sa mga ating teleport sa ating mga gardens and stuff. Tingnan natin kung ano bang makikita nating frames per second on this one. So, as you can see in here, we're teleporting right now. We could see that, well, there's the frame drop, of course, because we're teleporting right now. And once we're in the game, okay, so the FPS has improved, thankfully. Okay, so there we go. There we go. You could see here the lags and everything. So yeah, not surprising at all. I mean, this is a really demanding game. So let's see once we have the game at, oh, there we go, na mas demanding na graphic settings. There we go. Let's see. So you can see here that there's a lot of frame drops when there's a lot of action going on. You can see in there not much of a effects dun sa ating fight kanina, but you can see in here in our frame drops, you can see in here there's a lot of frame drops on the FPS graph below during the action scene, and there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of rendering. You can see that the smartphone is struggling, not struggling actually, but having a hard time in rendering these stuff. So there's a lot of frame drops that is going on. I believe Qualcomm and Samsung can still do a lot of optimizations for this one. I hope that they can do a lot of optimizations for this one kasi medyo hindi ako masaya sa frame rates. But yeah, it's 24, you can play it, but I want to play it at 30 frames per second at least, especially when there's a lot of things going on. Medyo demanding kasi. So let's try killing those mobs and let's see kung ano makukuha natin dito sa ating game. Alright, so let's see in here. Alright, so not much going on in here. There we go. It's Noel. Alright, so you can see in here there's a lot of frame drops. We're running at 20 frames per second right now, then 21. So, yeah, may mga lags tayo. You can play the game, of course, but you could notice that there's a frame drop na medyo makaka-affect na talaga do sa gameplay nyo on the smartphone. There we go, we finish a quest. And, yeah, we got some Primo Gems for that one. But we're still stuck at, yeah, 25 frames per second. The FPS on this one isn't the smoothest, as you can see in the FPS graph. There's a lot of frame drops, but yeah, you can play the game. Yeah, you can reach up to 30 frames per second right now, but it's not smooth. It's not stable at 30 frames per second. So there's a lot of things going on in the game. But yeah, at least we could play the game. That's the important thing. But if you're into heavier scenes, you need a lot of FPS for your needs game na to, you could play the game. You could play the game, but don't expect yung pinaka-smooth na graphic settings on this one. But yeah, it's nice to see that Genshin Impact is running on this one. So I'm gonna play the game pa rin. Tingnan natin kung ano makukuha natin median frames per second as we go on, as we play the game pa. So we're teleporting right now, so we're gonna see a lot of frame drops for this one again. So it's gonna affect our median frames per second. But yeah, there we go. It's going back up to 30 frames per second. So that's good. That is good. So we're gonna go dito sa isang quest, increasing danger. We're gonna navigate for that one. And yeah, let's see in here. So there we go. We got here the map. We haven't reached yung bagong region dito for a while. I haven't played Genshin Impact for a while. But yeah, you can see in here, okay, tumaas yung median frames per second natin from 24 to 25. I could feel the warm nung smartphone. But yeah, it's 23 median frames per second, 26. Important thing dito is we're running the game. There we go, some lags over there. That's 19 frames per second, as you can see in the graph below. It's not really that stable pagdating sa kanya frames. But again, you can play the game, which is the important thing dito sa smartphone na to. Yan. So may makikita nyo may mga konting frame drops. It's not really smooth pagdating sa kanyang frames. There we go. So we need to destroy the helichurl towers. And so there's reinforcements. To finish the game. There we go. our frames per second is dropping to 20 pag medyo heavy scenes tayo dito on the Galaxy A52 5G. Oh, there we go. So yeah, you've seen the action scenes. You saw that we're getting 20 frames per second pag nandun tayo sa heavy scenes. Not well, it's not that unplayable pala. Disappointing, yes, it's a little bit disappointing for some people that we can get it at those frame rates only. But yeah, it's nice to see that the game is still running at these frame rates. At this playable frame rates, at least playable. Yun yung important thing sa akin, it's playable. Tumatakbo siya sa game. Pero some people might find this one undesirable pagdating sa FPS. But yeah, I believe that's it dito sa ating Genshin Impact. Now, time to do our verdict dito sa ating mga findings dito sa Game Bench. Alright, so we've finished our benchmark for this one. So as you can see, nakikita nyo yung verdict right now. So as for the smartphone, we got here different games, 5 games. So first of all, Lara Croft Go. Again, the smartphone is capable of running at up to 120 Hz. So it's possible na magkamera tayo dito na 120 frames per second sa smartphone na to. And we got at Lara Croft Go at 79 frames per second at 81% stability. I was hoping na 120 frames per second siya. Unfortunately, it was not. Only 79. Going to naman sa Real Racing 3, it's also another game that is capable of going more than 90 frames per second sa ibang smartphone. So thankfully the smartphone was able to run it at 75 frames per second with 93% FPS stability. So again, nag-hope ako na sana more than 90 frames per second, but still nice that it broke the barrier ng 60 frames per second dito sa Real Racing 3. Now up to the next game natin, which is League of Legends Wild Rift. The smartphone was able to get it at 58 frames per second at 99% FPS stability. So what does that mean? Actually, the FPS dun sa League of Legends Wild Rift is smooth. I was actually expecting that since League of Legends Wild Rift is very optimized on all smartphones that I've tried. So it's nice to see that on the Galaxy A52 5G na ganito. And then going naman doon sa Pubg Mobile, we've only run the game at ultra frame rates at balance settings. Unfortunately, once we go to HD, there's no ultra frame rate on that one, so we have to rely on sa balance settings. But yeah, FPS stability was 91%. I could feel some of the frame drops before, pero naging okay naman, and it's 40 frames per second naman siya eventually, so medyo okay naman ako when playing Pubg Mobile on the Galaxy A52 5G. Now, here's dun sa medyo hindi naman disappointing, but yeah, it's a playable, but I've noticed that there's a lot of things going on. That's Genshin Impact, so that's 23 frames per second for dun sa game, sa median FPS natin with 70% FPS stability. You've seen kanina yung gameplay natin, we've seen that the smartphone struggles in the action scenes. We've been seeing FPS at below 20 frames per second. That's a little bit disappointing, but it's playable. I mean, in some cases, for some people, they might be happy that the smartphone can run the game at that frame rates. At least they can run the game. Yun yung mahalaga sa kanila. But yeah, it's nice to see that the smartphone was able to run Genshin Impact. So yeah, I guess that's it dito sa ating gaming review of the Galaxy A52 5G. So if you like this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and be sure to click the subscribe button along with that bell button to get notified of our latest videos here on my YouTube channel. So once again, I'm JamJamOnline.ph. Thank you for watching, and see you guys again sa susunod na video.